I am continuing my journey playing through the main entries of the Final Fantasy series and have reached the end of the PlayStation 1 era. When I was younger, I remember not fully loving the direction that the Final Fantasy series went during this time. While I did enjoy Final Fantasy 7 and 8, neither one of them were ones I loved to the same degree as Final Fantasy 4 or 6. I missed the more medieval fantasy setting and wanted to see a game that would bring that back to the forefront. So I was super excited to see that Final Fantasy 9 would do exactly that. I remember loving the game quite a bit then, but now that I'm older, does the game still hold up? That's what I'll be looking at in this review. Final Fantasy IX is a turn-based RPG developed by Square Enix. Although when first released, it was just Square that developed it. It was originally released in 2000, but the version I'm playing is a remaster that has a more convoluted release schedule. It was originally released for mobile in 2016 and then Windows later that year. It was then ported to PS4 in 2017 and then Switch and Xbox One in 2019. While the release date is all over the place, the price is the same on all platforms at $20.99. Final Fantasy IX is rated T, but honestly I'd put it in the fairly low range of T in terms of content. Final Fantasy IX felt like a much slower burn than the previous entries of the PS1 era Final Fantasies. You don't start the story by flipping off of a train at the start of your mission to blow up a reactor, or by preparing for and jumping into a conflict between nations as your mercenary final exam. Instead, Final Fantasy IX starts centered around a play called I Wanna Be Your Canary, that also doubles as a kidnapping mission. This play will serve as the meeting point for half of your main characters, including the main protagonist, Zidane. The start of your quest starts out small, but grows in scope as the game progresses. While the willing kidnapping of Princess Garnet is an enjoyable spectacle to start the game off with, it is a very different start than the action-packed, high adrenaline beginnings of the previous two games. This start is not the only thing you'll notice that's different about Final Fantasy IX compared to the other two games of this generation. You'll notice that the main character Zidane is quite different than the protagonists from the previous two games. Zidane is energetic, friendly, positive, and flirtatious, which is quite different from the aloof moodiness of Cloud and Squall. Overall, I would say that Final Fantasy IX is just a brighter and lighter game, at least until it's not. Final Fantasy IX might come wrapped in colorful packaging and have a more upbeat hero at the center of it all, but if you let your guard down, it will give you some emotional sucker punches that can send you reeling. The game gets pretty depressing at times and can be very philosophical as well, with many characters wondering what the meaning of life is and about their own purpose and existence. This makes for some great character moments throughout the game, as you see various characters wrestling with the events and noticeably changing as the game goes on. Now, this may sound only positive so far, but Final Fantasy IX's story does have its flaws as well. While there are many characters that I loved, there are also characters that I didn't enjoy so much, either just due to their personalities or because they weren't really given the same level of development as others, and sometimes a little bit of both. The overarching story also gets a little weird and uneven near the end. While the story starts small with trying to kidnap Garnet and take her to her uncle's kingdom, it quickly grows in scope. This growth isn't all bad, but around 3/4 through the story, the narrative takes some weird turns and gets a little convoluted. It also has a final boss that just kind of comes out of nowhere and makes you wonder how in the world you found yourself here by the end of it all. While these were flaws, the strength of the character development in the game was enough to not really make these odd narrative choices bother me too much. In fact, some of the oddness leads to one of my favorite character moments of the game. So even though the main story wobbles a bit near the end, I still enjoyed it mainly due to the strength of the characters that you're on the journey with. Just like all of the games of this generation, Final Fantasy IX continues using the active time battle system that was first seen in Final Fantasy IV. I really enjoy this system and it serves as a great foundation for the gameplay to build off of. I also like how progression is handled in Final Fantasy IX. After the complex and tedious junction system from Final Fantasy VIII, the system here is simple and enjoyable. Each of your characters start with a set class, like in Final Fantasy IV or VI. Unlike these games that often had you develop class skills by gaining levels, Final Fantasy IX has you learn skills by equipping weapons, armor, and accessories. These abilities are available for use when wearing the piece of equipment, but can be learned for good by earning ability points through monster battles. Some abilities can be learned by all characters, while others are either character specific or can only be learned by a few of the characters. These skills can also be divided into two types, active and passive. Active skills are the abilities that can be used in combat, like the learning of white magic, black magic, or sword arts. Passive skills are quite varied and include protection against certain status ailments, increases to HP or MP, increased attack against certain types of enemies, and many others. Active skills are available to use just by learning, but for passive skills to be activated you have to spend a character's ability points. Each passive has its own cost, so you have to spend your points wisely to best prepare for the battles that you'll be facing. Spent points aren't gone forever, as you can activate or deactivate passive skills to gain those points back. You do gain more ability points as you level up, but you'll never have enough to select all of your abilities at one time. This makes for a degree of customization that can help you prepare for battles and situations that you run into through the game. I really like this system as it gave you incentive to find all the equipment in the game, because it may give you a skill that only that weapon has. The only downside to this system is that characters you don't use regularly may have to equip some less powerful equipment for a time to learn certain abilities. If a piece of equipment does have one unique skill that only it gives, it might be weaker than the sword or spear that you have that doesn't give that ability. This personally didn't really bother me that much, but it was noticeable in the game. Another aspect of the combat and progression that people may not like is the way that limit breaks are handled in Final Fantasy IX. In both Final Fantasy VII and VIII, you could manipulate getting or saving your limit breaks pretty easily, but in Final Fantasy IX, you automatically go into trance, as it is called here, when your bar fills. This makes trance less controllable and more apt to be wasted. Again, while I noticed this, it didn't really bother me that much. Now, the combat had an active time battle system. There was also a gameplay element added that allowed you to see things from other characters' perspectives in the story parts of the game. So like if you entered a town and split up, it would have an active time event system. This was kind of neat, as it allowed you to develop characters, so you weren't just always with the party at all times. When you go to a town for first time and there's story things that would happen there, everyone would split up and you'd be able to see what everybody's doing, and it was kind of a nice system. Admittedly, a number of these were silly and didn't add too much, but other times it did help give context to what had been going on for other characters when you meet up with them later. Why somebody might be kind of pensive or not in the best of moods or in some wacky situation. There was one aspect of the game though that left a more mixed impression on me, and that is the number of side quests and mini games that Final Fantasy IX has. There are some of these that were quite enjoyable to do, like the Chocobo minigame, catching frogs, the Mognet quests, but there were others that were just not really much fun at all. Jump roping and Hippal racing being two of the more annoying, and the Excalibur 2 quest just seeming very difficult to pull off, and really the first time Final Fantasy had ever really done like a speed running kind of quest, so it just felt really out of place. I was also a little disappointed by Tetramaster compared to Triple Triad. I think Triple Triad was easier to understand and more fun overall, but I do admit that Tetramaster did grow on me as I played some, and it doesn't go all weird with the rules as you progress, so that was kind of nice as well. The biggest problem with this is in the achievements for the game. They require you to pretty much do all the side quests and mini games, including doing 1000 jumps in the jump rope game and going after Excalibur 2. This made the trophy list a little frustrating. While I don't really knock the game for its trophy list, it does force you into doing some of the more frustrating and annoying mini games on offer, and can be quite challenging with little real reward in game. Overall though, I love the gameplay of Final Fantasy IX. While there may be some things that you don't like more than I did, I felt like the game was very solid and had a fun progression system that was both simple but allowed for a good amount of customization. While there may have been a mixed bag of side quests and minigames, this really doesn't affect the game itself too much unless you're going for achievements. Final Fantasy IX came in at the end of the PlayStation 1 era, and you can really tell. It's rather impressive how far the series came from Final Fantasy VII's blocky 3D models to Final Fantasy IX. While I do know that this version is a remaster to Final Fantasy IX, you can just tell that the artistic vision and capabilities of both character models and the world feel a lot closer to seamless than previous entries. While the graphics are impressive, I also just really like the artistic direction of Final Fantasy IX. While many are a little put off by the weird proportions of the characters, I actually really like the style. It felt like it matched the world well and added to the fantastical feel of the game as a whole. On the sound side of things, Final Fantasy IX's soundtrack is again amazing. While the game in general is a tribute to the earlier games in the series, this is also found in the music. There are many songs that have elements of previous songs mixed in, like Vivi's theme that takes elements from Mysidia's theme from Final Fantasy IV. I loved many of the songs from the soundtrack, but a couple of my favorites have to be Not Alone and Melodies of Life. The sound direction of Final Fantasy has always been super solid, and Final Fantasy IX doesn't disappoint or break any trends in that regard. Final Fantasy IX is a fitting celebration of the NES and SNES eras of Final Fantasy that also brings its own unique story and cast of characters on a grand adventure. While that adventure does become a little weird near the end, the strength of the main characters and their development over the narrative kept it all together to make a satisfying and emotional journey. While I've gone back and forth a little bit, I feel like I can't help but give Final Fantasy IX a 10 out of 10. I really enjoyed going through this story with Zidane, Garnet, and Vivi and seeing how they grew and developed over the course of the story. While it's maybe not quite as action-packed and filled with spectacle like the previous games, it is one with a lot of heart, and I really enjoyed that. While I may not really care as much today about the move of Final Fantasy VII and VIII to more futuristic settings, I still find myself liking Final Fantasy IX the most of the PS1 generation. I feel like that's a bit of a minority opinion since Final Fantasy VII exists, but it's where I find myself regardless.